After 2.5 years of patches, seasons, and attempts at reviving the game, major content updates for Battlefield 2042 ends with Season 7.
Don't be sad. This is just how it works out sometimes.
I haven't bothered with getting back into the game after the disappointing launch, and because of that, I don't have any gameplay footage for this video. So I'll be using footage from the finals, since that game was built from X-Dice developers and features a lot of destruction. Go ahead and give that game a shot, by the way. I have a few videos up on my channel so you can see what it's about. Battlefield 2042 never really got its chance to shine. There was a lot to look forward to, such as the new Hazard Zone, which was shelved shortly after release, and the new Portal mode, which allowed players for the first time to create nearly any kind of experience they wanted. If I could take one thing from this Battlefield game and have it continue to exist for future installments, it would be Portal mode. With the right amount of support and a refined system, Portal mode could bring more players to Battlefield with everything from a tanks only mode to a snipers only mode and so much more. I know Portal mode wasn't easy to work with, but I always encourage developers to include tools like this so players can create the experience they want from their games. These kind of systems led to games like Dota 2 and a ton of custom modes in both GTA 5 and in Halo. Going back, before Battlefield 2042 was released, when we played the open betas, the game was not in a good state. Maps were barren and very uninteresting with barely any cover for infantry. There were all sorts of bugs and issues, such as jittering vehicles and more. When I played the open beta, I somehow got myself stuck in some railing and had no way to get out of it. Long story short, this game had too many issues to sort out, and most of them would not be able to be addressed in time of release. And before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a like and consider subscribing to see more videos more often. Sometime after the game's launch, the developers at DICE were accepting feedback for their maps, and what they could do to expand on them and make them more enjoyable. I have an entire video that goes over that when it happened, so feel free to take a look at what I had to say in detail. The takeaway I have from that video was with the map Kaleidoscope. The map takes place in a park in the middle of a city, and in my video, I mentioned that the park area that held two objectives were too open for infantry gameplay, and that a pop-up medical facility could help conceal infantry players from being seen by snipers and vehicles. Sure enough, when DICE released the rework for this map, they placed barracks in the location I mentioned. Now I'm sure a lot of other people were echoing the same message, and chances are they didn't make that change directly because of my own feedback, but who knows. And for every new season, DICE would release a rework of each original launch map one at a time, while adding one brand new map to the game, along with a few new weapons, gadgets, and of course, a battle pass. I did try to give the game a shot once or twice after launch, but I felt very disconnected with the game. There wasn't really anything they offered that made me want to keep playing or stick around. I almost gave the game another chance during Season 5, after they released a version of Zavod 311 from Battlefield 4. Unfortunately, the game had suffered too much of a hit and never regained popularity after release, even to the point where previous Battlefield games were having higher daily player numbers according to Steam charts. As the saying goes, too little, too late. Maybe if they were able to put more time and effort into having a large season with 3 new maps, 6 new weapons, and a couple of events, that might have helped bring players back in. The Battle Pass alone apparently was not enough to entice players to see what it offered. Now in Season 7, Battlefield 2042 gets one last brand new map, with the second map being a rework of the stadium from the launch map, Hourglass, along with the Battle Pass, a few new weapons, etc. etc. Battlefield's general manager, Brian Breed, announced Season 7 would be the last season for 2042. And unfortunately, EA will be pulling an Activision by dragging other studios into working on the next Battlefield game. Last time they did this was with Visceral Games, the studio that created the original Dead Space games, when they worked on Battlefield Hardline. Though Hardline was a personal favorite for me, it wasn't what most Battlefield fans wanted at the time. With the lack of interest players had with Hardline, it led to the closing of Visceral Games. This time around, it's Motive Studios, which ironically enough, worked on the Dead Space remake, and there's been rumors floating around that the remake for Dead Space 2 was cancelled due to poor sales, and we're still waiting for confirmation on that. Funny how these publishers just never seem to learn their lesson. Don't be surprised if Motive Studios shuts down after they're done with supporting the next Battlefield game. At this time, Motive Studios is still working on another project, which is a new Iron Man game, so they'll be working on at least 2 projects at the same time. I do hope the best for Motive Studios and that they don't get unceremoniously shut down by EA. I know there are some die-hard Battlefield fans who would have liked to see more support for 2042, and so do I, but I do think it's time to move on. I'd rather see support for 2042 end off sooner rather than later, and look forward to the next game. As I mentioned earlier, not everything 2042 did was bad, but it was poorly executed from the start. Battlefield 2042 provided a very poor and lackluster live service for the past 2.5 years, and compare that to any major competitor. Overwatch 2, for example, has had 10 seasons since its release in October 2022. Rainbow Six Siege offers 4 seasons each year, and Call of Duty finds a way to fit 5 or 6 seasons worth of content each year. Battlefield was not always a live service game. Back in Battlefield 4, it was a premium service title, which meant they would release a lot of content after a few months, but it would be priced at $15 per DLC. These DLC packs would have 4 maps, 5 new weapons, and a few other items. Not everything was under a paywall, as every so often they would release a DLC for free, and any major patches to the game would affect the entire game, including the base version and not just the DLC. I also want to quickly mention that by no means is Battlefield 4 a perfect game. It had plenty of issues all the way from release until now, even to the point when it was originally released that there was a lawsuit filed against EA just for how bad the game was when it first launched. Lately, there's been some talk as to whether or not Battlefield should go back to being a premium title. However, I'm not really sold on that idea. As it is, the Battle Pass they release is sold for roughly the same price, with the standard pass being $10 and the ultimate pack for $20. The current problem for Battlefield is simply the lack of playable content and supporting the more unique game modes. The Battle Royale genre hasn't faded out, and some people want to see that mode return to Battlefield after its first attempt being called Firestorm in Battlefield 5. At the same time, extraction shooters have been getting more popular, and a new attempt at a Hazard Zone type game mode could also be something they can focus on. Right now, I think that the developers should focus on making maps that works for the game's primary conquest mode. The focus for 2042 was to make maps large enough to carry 128 players. The maps were just not great. They also didn't spend time making smaller maps that fit the traditional Battlefield experience. Once you have maps that fit the game and are enjoyable, everything else can be built on top of that. This is why Verdansk is hailed as the best Battle Royale map for Warzone. Many of the point of interest were modeled after multiplayer maps, and the other sections were built to work as its own smaller ground war game mode. In my opinion, the resources you need to make a great Battlefield Conquest map and a great Battlefield Battle Royale or extraction shooter are exactly the same, with the only differences being objectives, extraction points, and limiting the playable areas on the map. I am simplifying it to some degree, but it all hinges on making the base game fun first. Battlefield's Frostbite engine, though cumbersome and difficult to use, has been great at making large-scale maps, and in an alternate reality, Battlefield would be the #1 Battle Royale game, with a dozen or so active Battle Royale maps being available all at the same time. You pair that with Portal mode, and now you have players making their own Battle Royale modes and possibly tournaments within Battlefield. Pushing Battlefield back to premium title can guarantee that we get 4 maps per season. I don't think we need to go that route. It's already expected for Battlefield to release 4 maps each season. If they're unable to do that, then we should not support it in the first place. At the very least, not this time around. Maybe it would be better if they made a hybrid system where there would be 2 major DLC packs for $15 to $20, which includes 4 new maps, several weapons, and so on, with all the other DLC maps and weapons being free to play with purchase of the base game. Either way, there's a lot that DICE and EA have to do to regain the trust of its players, and that starts with providing a lot more content off the bat and being able to support and provide 3 or more maps each season, as well as their maps actually being good and not having to go back and redo their work for the entire life cycle of their game. Thanks for getting this far in the video. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a like and consider subscribing. Let me know what your thoughts are on this, and let's hope that Battlefield can return to its former glory. Until then, I am Mr. Rain, and I will see you next time.